Today we are chatting all about back to school considerations and what you want to remember as you head into this new semester, whatever it might be for you, whether you're maybe starting college or starting high school, starting middle school, whatever it might be. We are going to chat about considerations that you want to think about in regards to building a balanced lifestyle, especially when it comes to your food choices. For those of you who don't know me already, I'm Rachel Fine. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, specifically working with dancers, and I am the face over at the account To The Point Nutrition. So you can always feel free to check me out over there after the live. I love giving tips and advice pretty much every day to my followers, and of course to the dancers who work with me within my community, which is called The Healthy Dancer. 3 of my most important considerations for you to remember as you head back to school. What it means to nourish adequately now and how that differs from where you may have been over the summer. So it's September, we're pretty much getting back into the grind of school, whether you are in a full-term dance program, maybe it's like a pre-professional program, or maybe not, maybe you're going back to academic coursework and balancing that with your dancing schedule. But I can promise you that 99.9% of you, whatever it might be, whatever you are beginning this September, you are going to be busy, right? You're going to be busy. You're going to be balancing a lot more on your schedule. See, when we are in our summer intensive, we're busy, but it's usually just focused on whatever artistic work we're working on. So dancing, for example. Now that comes with its whole set of important nutrition considerations to remember. The difference between that and now as we head back to school is that very often we have so many different avenues now that we are coordinating. So it's not just a lot on us physically, but it's also a lot on us mentally. And we need to make sure that we're fueling adequately for this time. So as a registered dietitian, if you follow me, then you know I wear 2 hats. The 2 hats are, I'm a specialist in sports nutrition or performance nutrition, but I'm also a specialist and certified counselor of intuitive eating. And there are these 2 essentially schools of thought in regards to the principles of sports nutrition and the principles of intuitive eating being a non-diet approach to how we're fueling our body and really taking into account our biological cues of hunger and fullness and satisfaction, which by the way integrate very well with performance nutrition. But what I do with dancers is integrate these 2 principles. But here's the thing with your schedule right now, and this is the first consideration I want you to remember. Because you're so busy, it's going to be super hard for us to necessarily rely on biological cues of hunger. So rule of thumb, if you're hungry, you should eat. If you are feeling hunger, you should eat. You need to honor that biological cue. That is literally your body telling you that it needs fuel or it needs to replenish fuel. But sometimes I hear from a lot of dancers, I know this even for my own self, it can be super confusing because sometimes we don't feel hunger during the day. And usually this is a very natural response to being busy. It's also a natural response to being very physically active. So whether you are, again, coordinating your academic schedule with your dancing schedule, or you are solely just dancing, it's very common for you to not necessarily feel those biological hunger cues. This is where having a proactive approach to fueling your body is critical as you head back to school. So essentially what this means is that you need to give your body what it needs biologically. So this means you need to give it carbohydrates, protein, fat, all of these important nourishing nutrients that we get from food. We need to give our bodies this consistently throughout the day. Now, sometimes we might not feel those biological cues that's essentially telling us that we need to eat, or hunger cues. That's why you need to have a proactive approach and really plan ahead your fueling of your body throughout the day. So essentially what this looks like is having a meal or a snack every 2 to 4 hours, depending on your personal schedule. I have to give that wide of a range when I'm doing something like an Instagram Live, because I am not, of course, working with you one-on-one at the moment where we can formulate a more specialized plan. With the dancers who work with me in my program, the Healthy Dancer, we do sit down and talk more about specifics. But as a general way of being, you really don't want to necessarily go longer than 4 hours without repleting your body's energy needs, or essentially without having a meal or a snack to replenish your energy levels, to promote recovery, whether that's recovery from a class or not. You need to provide your body with consistent fuel throughout the day, and that essentially looks like having a meal or snack every 2 to 4 hours. This is having that proactive approach. So we're not necessarily saying that we are only eating when we feel hungry, because it is so common in this time of your year to not necessarily feel those hunger cues. They might not hit you until later in the day when they kind of slap you in the face and you are famished before heading into dinner, right? We want to try and step ahead and be proactive and make sure you're fueling consistently. So that's really my first consideration for you, is to remember that proactive approach to fueling consistently throughout your day. Super important as you are now navigating so many different avenues throughout your academic schedule, throughout your dance schedule. A lot of new things are happening right now. You might have new teachers from last year. You might be with new dance friends. You might be in a new placement group. There's so much new usually happening in September. So that's why we often have to take that proactive approach, because naturally we're busier and just not necessarily thinking about our hunger cues. The second consideration I want you to remember as you head back to school: balance. What I'm talking about when I mean balance, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is remembering your 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Now, I dive into this in depth in the Healthy Dancer community. Each of these macronutrients is super important to your body. Also super important to your plate in regards to promoting satisfaction and fullness. But in regards to your body, we want to make sure that your meals and snacks are balanced, because this is what's going to best set you up for optimal energy levels, right? This is how you're going to optimize those actual meals and snacks that you're making to really help you with your energy in class. So it's not just about really eating anything, it's about really planning ahead of time, having more of that proactive approach when it comes to balance as well. Making sure you are getting your sources of carbohydrates in, whether that's bread, whether that's some grains, whether that's fruit. Making sure that you are getting your protein in, whether that's animal proteins or plant proteins. Both are great options for a balanced lifestyle. And then of course you want to remember fat. Don't fear fat. Fat is an essential macronutrient as part of our balanced plate, really helping with vitamin absorption, helping with satisfaction, feelings of fullness, helping to relieve that chronic low-lying hunger you might feel after years of restrictive dieting. We need to incorporate all 3 of these macronutrients onto your balanced meal or balanced snack. Now, something that's super important to remember also around this time of year: convenience. So you are likely not going to have the time to either sit down and meal prep these beautiful Pinterest ready meals. And I don't want you to even put the pressure on yourself to do that. So thinking of and formulating a bunch of emergency balanced snacks can be essential for your dance bag or for your school bag, whatever it might be. Couple of my personal favorites, and those that I recommend to the dancers I work with: bars are really convenient, really helpful. Trail mix, personal favorite of mine. You can get really creative, mix around the ingredients in there, whether you're adding chocolate chips or M&Ms, pairing it with pretzels, pairing it with nuts and dried fruit. There's so many different options you can add to a trail mix. That's why I love them. They're very versatile. Fruit with nut butter or fruit with sea butter if you have an allergy, it's another great snack. Cheese and crackers, you can make a snack box. I also love doing this with the dancers I work with. We will make a snack box of a bunch of different convenient and packable options that they know they have on hand throughout the day. This is essential for this time of year, right? Because most of you are likely going from school and then carpooling to dance, or you're going to be in dance pretty much from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you need to make sure you have those grab and go options, maybe when you're changing into your point shoes and so forth. So we said fruit with nut butter, we said crackers with cheese, hummus or guacamole with chips. These are also great balanced options. Maybe add in some sliced veggies in there, like sliced cucumbers and peppers with your crackers. That can be another really great option. So you want to plan ahead, have that proactive approach, even in regards to these snacks, making sure that you are planning those balanced options, because this is what allows you to remember that first consideration, which is fueling consistently throughout the day. So we covered meeting these biological needs of fueling your body with adequate energy. And essentially that looks like getting in that meal or snack every 2 to 4 hours, right? And we spoke about consistency. We also spoke about balance. Those two really big, important considerations when it comes to making sure you are providing your body with the biological needs that it requires. Now, the third thing I want you to remember is how can we actually start considering the work of intuitive eating despite having this crazy busy schedule? So as I said earlier, intuitive eating is something I work on with all the dancers in the Healthy Dancer community, but it's basically a non-diet approach to fueling our body where we are developing habits that are centered around an inclusive mindset around food rather than an exclusive mindset, right? So we're not restricting, we're not saying foods are good or bad for health. We're actually eradicating that good and bad mindset completely, and we are diving deeper into what our body enjoys and really prioritizing food preferences, because it can be super easy for us dancers to get very hung up on what dancer diet culture is essentially telling us as being like what they're the quote unquote best foods. And while there are certain foods that might nourish your performance more than others, it doesn't mean that we need to eliminate any foods. I want you to know that you can incorporate all of your favorite foods throughout your day at any point. We just want to perhaps maybe prioritize certain foods at certain times, right? Like if you're heading into a performance, I might say, okay, well at that time, maybe within the 30 minutes prior to your performance or prior to your class, we want to think about something that's going to be a little bit more easily digestible, right? Like this crazy high fiber or salad, whatever that might be, might not be necessarily be the best option right before you head into a class because you might not feel so great from it, might make your tummy feel a little bit uncomfortable. So it's not to say, salads are obviously very nourishing, but we want to make sure that we are also optimizing the times that we're eating certain meals and snacks throughout the day as well. This, of course, I go into detail with in the Healthy Dancer. But when it comes to intuitive eating, what I want you to remember is if there's ever times in your day or in your week that you have a little bit more time to perhaps sit down and create more of an experience around your meal, I would say that's one of the first steps. So for example, maybe it's on a weekend where you have a little bit of extra time. You can, maybe have some fun creating a meal, utilizing a recipe. I give the dancers a zillion recipes in the Healthy Dancer community to play around with and enjoy it. Sit down, close your screens, think about mindful eating techniques. Again, this isn't going to be something that you're necessarily going to be doing on an everyday basis right now, because like I said, those first two considerations and even that convenience consideration is really taking into account your busy schedule right now. But it doesn't mean that I don't want you to incorporate any bit of this work towards finding food freedom and finding a more intuitive practice with your eating. I just want to see when can we do this during our week when we have the time to do it. So usually that might be on a weekend. I know some of you have a ton of rehearsals, especially as we head into Nutcracker season. You have a ton of rehearsals on the weekend, but when can we find times to perhaps make eating a very special experience? So that's what I want you to think about, right? Because sometimes eating these convenient snacks that I'm talking about, like when we're changing our point shoes, it's not going to be the most mindful experience around your food. And that's just practicality. We call this actually practical hunger. It's using a very practical approach to give your body that fuel it needs biologically. And that's, I feel like for dancers, 80% of the time, sometimes we're doing that, right? But we still want to make sure, when can I prioritize food as being an experience, getting into the kitchen, having fun with it, or maybe that means going out with friends and having fun with it, without, of course, tying in feelings of like guilt, anxiety, or shame. A lot of these things that I, by the way, talk about over on my account, To The Point Nutrition. I also have a lot of blog posts on my blog, dancenutrition.com, that you can always check out when it comes to breaking down these topics a little bit more. But there you have it. 3 considerations to remember. The first was thinking about consistency, fueling your body every 2 to 4 hours. That might mean having a proactive approach, right? We always want to honor hunger cues, but sometimes we need to take it a step further and have a proactive approach, right? And even eating when we might not be feeling so hungry, but you're planning ahead for perhaps what might be a very long stretch of dancing or academic coursework, and you want to make sure that you are fueling adequately for that. Next consideration, you're remembering balance among those 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And if you want to break this down a little bit further, I would say head over to my blog, dancenutrition.com. There's a search function. You can type in any of these macronutrients and you will be led to a bunch of different articles that talk more about balance. And then that third consideration, when can we consider times of integrating an intuitive practice into our food, right? Might not be on an everyday basis. Maybe it's on a Sunday when you have more time, but I do want you to try and work on those mindful experiences around food as well. Well, I hope this helped you guys with just getting a little bit into the zone of back to school. I know a lot of you have already started school. A lot of you might be starting tomorrow or starting maybe early next week. But that's 3 considerations for you to remember. If you want to dive deeper into this with me, then I suggest you go over, follow me at To The Point Nutrition. You can, like I said, check out my blog. You can even join me in the Healthy Dancer community. I have so many different avenues in which you can join me in this community, lots of different price points as well. So it might not just be working with me one-on-one. I have a bunch of group programs. I have a summer intensive. I have a winter intensive. Bye.